Hello, my name is Jeremy Barnes, and today I'm going to do a review for 2025's Superman movie by James Gunn. And I'm going to start my review, which will be spoiler free, um, by just giving you some setup for my kind of entry point into the character. Because Superman is a character that I wasn't always a fan of, but I'm basing my kind of thoughts and my opinions and what I'm gonna kind of say about this movie um off of my previous kind of relationship with Superman as a character and how I've enjoyed Superman stories before. So Smallville was my introduction to Superman and the only thing I liked that had Superman in it until the film Man of Steel in 2013. Um, and I think Smallville was cool because it was like kind of a teen drama, first and foremost. And as like a young kid, when I was watching it while it was airing, it just like seemed really cool and interesting to me, with those kind of character dynamics and stuff like that. And I was always a fan of superheroes in other places, so having that element in it as well as those character interactions made it something that was interesting to me. Um, but I was never really interested in Superman in any of the movies. Um, and the reason why I did like Man of Steel was because of how grounded it was, especially when it comes to the emotion of the character. Because in that movie was the first time where I actually felt the humanity of Superman as a character, of Clark Kent. Um, Whereas before, I always just thought of Superman as like this mythical character who has all these powers and seems kind of invincible. And for that reason, it wasn't really interesting to me. But Man of Steel was interesting in the pathos of the character, and that's kind of what hooked me into it. And Henry Cavill's portrayal was just so good at delivering that. And then plus it also had some cool sci-fi elements that were visually appealing, which are always cool to see in films. At least for my taste. So all that stuff was really cool. I guess I could also say that I'm coming into all kind of superhero or comic book films as a film fan first and foremost because I'm not somebody who reads comics. So if you're looking for like a comic book kind of viewpoint into the movie, I'm not the person to go to. But I know a good amount about a lot of comic book characters just from reading about them, not necessarily reading the stories they're in, but reading about some of their stories and about the characters through things like Wikipedia, some like fan pages, and then also just kind of hearing about it or seeing stuff like in other things like cartoons, animated films, video games, and stuff like that. Um, so what I would say though is that I think probably for comic book fans, they might like this movie more than maybe somebody like me who is more of like a casual film goer watching it. So I'll kind of like leave it there in terms of like the entry point into it, and then now I'll have my kind of my overall thoughts about the movie itself. And I would say that this movie kind of throws the audience into its world, expecting you to accept it as if you've been witness to this world for a while. Which for my taste as like a more of a general audience member was a little bit kind of like a bit of whiplash for me. Um, I could respect the decision because it's not really holding the audience's hand. And I think because of all the other kind of superhero or comic book movies that we've had, maybe it's more acceptable for some of these things to be happening in a movie without the movie needing to explain all of it necessarily. So for that reason, I think it's kind of bold the way that they did it. And I think for the most part, like things don't need to be explained to you. It was just a lot going on for me that it just felt a little bit overwhelming. Um, and for that reason as well, the movie to me felt more like a product and less like a film as a piece of art. Um, so I didn't really like it for that reason. Um, Overall, I still did like the movie, but less than I was hoping to, and not as much as Man of Steel, which I actually love that movie. And there were some things about Superman 2025 that I had heard about, like even from the kind of early inception of it when James Gunn first kind of was becoming the head of the DC kind of film universe, and the first kind of press thing that he did where he was kind of announcing a lot of stuff at the beginning, um, where those ideas sounded really cool, and I felt like those were more exciting hearing about than actually seeing it in the movie and the execution of it. Um, so that's kind of how I feel, and I'll go into that a little bit more later. I'm not sure if I'm gonna have a separate video for the spoilers or if it'll just be at the end of this video. It depends on how long it is, but um, it might be for my spoiler review. So if it's in a different video, I'll have that kind of as a option to open up separately at the end of this video. Otherwise, there'll be timestamps in the description. So now I'm going to go into individual parts of the movie. Beginning first and foremost is the story itself. So the way that I would describe this story is it's a story of a man trying to do the right thing when his rival is doing everything in his power to destroy him without ever confronting him directly. So I don't know. I think Superman and Clark Kent know about Lex Luthor because he's like famous businessman, kind of like how in our world we have like these billionaire tech people like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, the Apple CEO, um what's his name, Steve Jobs. People kind of like that. Is kind of how Lex seems in this movie. Um, so I think Clark knows about him just from that persona, but I don't know if he knows that Lex has this hatred towards him. Um, but Lex behind the scenes is putting things in a play where he's just trying to ruin Superman's life, and he doesn't know that Superman is Clark Kent. He doesn't know who Superman is, but he's doing everything that he does know about Superman, and like from research, studying him to bring his downfall. Um, but through all that, Superman is just always trying to do the right thing in the right way to what he believes is the best way to go about it, and to cause the fewest casualties possible. And then I also want to speak separately on the plot because even though that story is kind of the baseline and like the skeleton and kind of the heart of the movie, the way that I was describing how this movie felt more like a product is with the plot, where there's just a lot going on, and to me it actually kind of takes away from that story and that heart. But basically, the basic overall plot of the entire film is a white savior film in which Superman, as the white savior, stalls a war between an invading European country on a brown Middle Eastern coded country. And this leads to problems for the US government and for Clark's relationship with Lois Lane as a reporter. And at the start of this movie, they're already dating, but they're not like super serious yet. Um, so this is kind of like early stages, I think, kind of in their relationship. It's not clear exactly how long they've been dating. I'm not sure if they say it, but if they do, it's like at least 3 months, but maybe more. But I think less than a year. Um, and then alongside that, the plot is also kind of an immigrant story where his biological parents intend for him to kind of overtake the home that they sent him to, but then the character Clark Kent or Superman choosing to use the ideals that his adopted parents taught him to be better than maybe what his biological parents intended for him, or what their wishes might have been. Um, and that's less of a part of the movie than the first part that I said, but it is kind of a big part by the end of it. And it leads to, I think, a lot of the conflict that Superman is faced with. And that's some of the stuff that's orchestrated by Lex Luthor, who is Superman's arch nemesis. The next section I'm going to talk about is the tone of the film, which it has a very light tone with comedy that works in a way where it's not too much, like it doesn't overpower the movie, but it's also not what I would prefer to see in a Superman movie because Superman can have comedy, but it shouldn't be a comedy, and I don't think this movie really is, but it's like kind of teetering from being a comedy and not being a comedy. So I think like a lot less of that tone would be better fitted for a Superman movie, in my opinion. And I would say that the movie also seems scared to ever get too serious, which means it'll probably play better for kids than it would for most adults. And that's kind of, I think, part of the tone, obviously, because it does get serious at times. But there's like one moment in particular where a serious moment then kind of just cuts back to like comedy, or maybe it was the other way around. I'm not exactly sure from memory. It might have been something like really, or it might have went back and forth. So it might have been this serious moment happened, then we go back to comedy, and then it goes back to the serious. But having it go from the comedy to the serious, it didn't, you know, make an impact on me on the emotional way that I feel like it should have. If it just kind of stayed with that moment, that serious moment, and then maybe lightly kind of went back to a little bit more comedy. So it was just kind of like, weird. It wasn't bad, but I just feel like they could have hit a little bit harder with the emotion. Um, Now the action, to me, is not up to par with Man of Steel, but it was good enough that it's still exciting to watch, and a lot of the action is character driven, which is always a good thing. Um, so I did like that about it. It was nice seeing Superman saving all types of life from destruction, which is kind of what the focus was in a lot of the action, instead of just being like cool. But there was like one or two actual cool moments as well. I would say for the action, the probably the coolest thing was the flight moments. But sometimes the way that it was shot, like really close on Superman's face, just wasn't really, to me, it didn't look that cool. Like it just looked kind of funny. And I think it worked better when it was on wide shots, which was incorporated in parts of the movie. And I definitely like those parts a lot more than those like close up shots. Um, and that is also something that I think I preferred in Man of Steel, the way that those flight scenes were shown. But there were some cool moments in this one as well. Now I'm gonna move on to the music, which the theme, the Superman theme, was a great mixture of the John Williams and Hans Zimmer theme for Superman. But besides that, the score was kind of like it didn't stand out. Um, Aside from Lex Luthor's theme, which he had his own new unique theme, and I felt like that music was the only music in the film besides the main Superman theme. that actually like made an impact. And I honestly I think that theme was better. Like I actually prefer that even over the Superman theme. Like that shit was just really cool. I like the vibe of that. Honestly, Lex is also just one of my favorite parts of the movie. And I'm gonna go into the characters now. I'll get back to Lex, just because I feel like I should start with Superman. But for Clark Kent Superman, I feel like his portrayal in this movie was perfect. David Cornsweet plays the lovable Kansas boy with great intention as someone who is just always trying to do the right thing, using the gifts he's been given on the planet he landed on. And he struggles to fully think about the consequences of his actions, but they're always guided by the best intentions and for life to continue always and for foremost. Like that is always what he intends to do in all of his actions as Superman. And I would say that Clark Kent loves fully and deeply, and Superman Clark Kent, like kind of both of them, what depending on like no matter which kind of persona he's playing at any given moment. I feel like he makes room for others who are different, but he's always true to himself as well. So all of that stuff was really good. I really liked that. I really liked his character. And as like a version of Superman, I definitely do think he is one of the better versions. That was fantastic. Something else that was perfect was Lois Lane in the movie. I felt like Rachel Brosnahan's portrayal was probably the best version that I've seen. Um, and the way I would describe her is that she's a skeptical but very good journalist who struggles with relationships because of her dedication to her job. And in her relationship with Clark, she pushes him in a way that he doesn't really push her, but she does it with good intentions. And she's also not afraid to get her hands dirty by traveling to potentially dangerous places, to learn the truth and then obviously report on it, and give it to the people because that's what the people deserve. And the media in this film is portrayed as having connections with Lex Luthor, where he pays them to kind of tell a certain side of a story, or to tell his story. So she's the one that just trying to get the actual truth out there. So that was really good. And I like everything about her in this movie. Now Lex, even though I said he was one of my favorite parts of the movie, I would say that his portrayal was not perfect. Lois Lane is another favorite part of the movie for me. Um, but for Lex, I would say that the best way to describe this version of him is he's a certified hater with ambitious drive and determination, and he leads with cocky confidence, but under the surface, he just wants to be acknowledged for his hard work and to be loved. But because Superman gets this love from the humans so easily, Lex forms this unhealthy jealousy towards what he describes as an it. He looks at Superman as less because of being from another planet, and he doesn't even like metahumans either. So Superman to him is just like the worst of them because he's not even from Earth, and yeah, he's just pretty much jealous, and that's why he's trying to take him down because he doesn't think that Superman deserves all this love and attention that everybody's giving him. And that stuff was good. It was just some parts that kind of arise at by the end of the film that is the part that I didn't really love about Lex Luthor and what lowers it from being another perfect role for me. But it's near perfect, so it, like I said, really good. Now I'm gonna talk about the Daily Planet characters, but I'm gonna kind of group them together as like this office kind of situation. And I would say the biggest one besides Lois Lane, that was included in this movie as like a character who has like the most to do is Jimmy Olsen. And this is the first Jimmy Olsen that I'm like really getting to see, because there was a Jimmy in Batman versus Superman, but he wasn't really anything like how Jimmy Olsen is supposed to be, and I didn't give a fuck about him in that movie. So this Jimmy Olsen was cool. He was smart and resourceful, but he often uses people to his own ends, which I have more to talk about in the spoiler section. But overall, he was cool and also funny. So I did like him as a character overall. And then Perry White is the editor. He's like the J. Jonah Jameson of the Daily Planet. Even though Superman's comics came first, so maybe it would be the other way for Spider-Man. But I would say for this version of Perry, we only get a small glimpse at him, but I liked his attitude and the body language he used. And I do hope to see more of the Daily Planet in the future to really flesh out these characters. Perry White, Steve Lombard is the next one. He's the sports writer there, and this guy is a funny guy to make fun of because he thinks he's cool, but he's actually not really cool. But under the surface, there's kind of like a decent person under his narcissistic kind of personality. And he was a funny character in the movie. And even that kind of decent person that I'm talking about, the way that it was played in the movie was for comedy, and I think it worked. But it would be cool to like in the future eventually get some actual like genuine moments with him as well. Since I do see that that is part of his character. And then the last person that I could think of in the Daily Planet that was in this movie is Cat Grant. And I'm not really sure what her role is. Like, I don't know if she's just another journalist, if she covers the news or what. But basically, the way she's portrayed here is that she's just somebody in the office that has eyes for Clark and is nice and, in my opinion, very attractive. But I don't know if Clark even really. I mean, he probably knows her, but I don't know if he has any sort of relationship with her. And I don't know if he sees that she's interested in him. And maybe it's because Clark just has eyes for Lois, so he's loyal. Um, and I don't even know if Kat knows that Lois is dating Clark, so she thinks he's single, but he's actually not single because it seems like their relationship is pretty professional in the office. Like I don't think they are ever intimate in the office. Anything between them is for outside, and while they're there, they seem just like coworkers. So that was kind of an interesting dynamic as well. The next character I'm going to talk about is Eve Teschmacher, and she's Lex's social media savvy girlfriend who just wants love and needs it through attention, which explains her social media presence. And she's only with Lex in the film for his influence, but she actually loves a good guy who would appreciate her. Um, so she's just kind of like a seemed like a kind of misguided type of character, but she does play an important role by the end of the film, and definitely bigger than I was expecting. And she's not just a straight up like bad guy or bad girl on the like primary antagonist side of things, so she has some like dimensionality to her, which was cool. Now another kind of grouped kind of character section that I'm gonna talk about are the Justice Gang members. And it's the precursor to these guys, the Justice League, who are in this film are not a thing yet, but they are getting there, and they're just calling themselves the Justice Gang, which is a name that Guy Gardner's Green Lantern came up with, and the others actually don't really like, but obviously it'll eventually lead to the Justice League, and they do operate in the Hall of Justice, so that was a cool location to see in the film. And in this movie, they are a corporate backed group, backed by Maxwell Lord, who we don't really see in this movie except for as like a little cameo at the end. But the first person in the team that I'm going to talk about is Guy Gardner, and I would say that he was really funny in a kind of jock kind of way. And he seems dumb, but he kind of grows on you as a character, and I actually quite enjoyed him. So that was cool to see. He's definitely not the coolest Green Lantern, but he is a fun character to kind of get to know. And then the next character is Mr. Terrific, who I would say is the most valuable member of the group, with his immense intelligence and will to go out of his station, in terms of like working under this corporate leadership to do what he thinks is good. And he's also just a fucking complete badass and another kind of standout part of the movie for me. He was definitely the coolest hero in the movie. So he was my favorite superpowered person easily. And then the last member so far of the Justice Gang is Hawkgirl, and she's a cool metahuman with screeching abilities and obviously flight with her wings. But she didn't really bring a lot of intention in this film in her superheroism. She kind of just, does the job in terms of whoever's paying her. She does what they want and doesn't really do much else, seemingly. And she's also morally questionable, but overall good. Like any morally questionable acts that she does it on who I would agree is or are bad people. Um, but it's not like something that Superman himself would do. So there's that. And I don't think that this version of Hawkgirl is the one that is connected with Hawkman, who was in the Black Adam movie, and that's the only version I think maybe besides I think a movie that I seen an animated movie with Hawkman and Hawkgirl. Um, but this Hawkgirl was definitely not as cool as Hawkman was in Black Adam. So I just kind of hope to see more, especially because she's played by Isabella Merced, who is great. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of her in the future and really diving into her character. The next character I'm going to talk about is Metamorpho, who's another metahuman and uh, was also very cool. And I would say that his powers was actually probably one of the coolest powers in the movie. And he has the ability to morph any part of his body into any element, making him highly valuable, not just to the good guys, but also to be used by the bad guys. And his role actually was quite surprising for me, because his character is actually one of the few parts of the movie that actually does hit emotionally, and the actor did a great job conveying that emotion. So that was pretty cool. He was also a standout for me. The next character is on Lex's side, and she's the engineer. She's pretty much just a one-note supervillain who serves as Lex's muscle. And her ability is that she uses nanotechnology to shapeshift, pretty much, and like create weapons that she could throw and stuff like that. Um, Visually, it was decently cool, but it was also kind of flat because she just like has a black costume. Um, but yeah, but she was just kind of whatever for me. Um, a character who wasn't really a part of this movie and was more so used for kind of setup for the DC universe that they're starting now is Rick Flag Sr., portrayed by. He is a character that I saw in the technically first thing in the DC universe, which maybe is like kind of the zero thing, and then Superman would be the first one, so it's like kind of a prequel. But Creature Commandos. And Rick Flag Sr. was in that. But honestly, in this movie, he seemed like a different character to me than the way that he was portrayed in that show. And it's not just because he doesn't have the white hair that he had in the animated version, which I found out more recently is the reason is that he was doing something else where he couldn't have that white hair. Um, he just everything about him, he just seemed like a different character to me. Um, but he does seem to be a good guy, which is in line with how he seemed in Creature Commandos. And he was kind of on Superman's side, but his hands kind of forced because I think they say he's the Secretary of State in this movie, or maybe he's like the leader of Argus. I'm not exactly sure exactly where he falls into things, but he's definitely like a government agent, who I think interacts with the president. Um, but yeah, I don't really have opinions on whether he was a good or bad character in the movie. He's just kind of in it. The next character though is Krypto, the dog, Superman's dog, super dog. And to me, he was kind of whatever. I'm not really a dog person to begin with, but Krypto wasn't really a character to me. Um, but I would say that he was very realistic as a dog, and he was not a good boy. But I do like the dynamic that he had with Superman, and I might talk about that if I remember in the spoiler section. But yeah, but Krypto he didn't really land as well as some other James Gunn CG animal characters. So that's kind of how I'm feeling about that. The next two characters are Pa and Ma Kent, who also were more of a unit and less individual characters. They were believable as an older couple from the country, and they seemed decent, like they seem like decent people, but we don't get to really see who any of them are, which is a shame because a lot of this movie rides on how we assume they raised Clark to be who he is in this movie, but we don't really get to see any of that. So like I don't have any attachment to them. Um, and we have to like just assume that they did a good job raising him, and that's where he gets his personality from. We only get a real scene with Jonathan Kent, who in this movie is depicted as like a huge softie who was able to get Clark back on track when he's going through a tough time. And that scene was a good scene, and that it did hit emotionally, but it seemed a little bit forced just because that's all we got for me. Um, and just the way that Ma Kent, Martha was kind of describing him, where he's just mushy. So he was crying just because he's always crying, but it didn't seem like he was crying because of how strongly he was feeling in that moment of speaking with Clark. Um, but I do hope to see more of him, and I am sold on him as Jonathan Kent. I'm not sold on the actress who plays Martha Kent, but there is a kind of nice touch of making them seem like older kind of parents. Um, and Martha had like a realistic kind of thing where she kind of struggles with technology, um, which was like kind of funny. Uh, the last two characters I'm gonna talk about are Kal-El's biological parents, Jor-El and Lara Lor-Van. And similarly to Pa and Ma Kent, we don't really see them too much, and we never see them in the flesh in this movie. But the way that they seem to me is very cold, and like they only sent Kal-El to ensure their own race's survival. But I personally didn't feel the love for Clark or for Kal-El, I mean, that I have felt in other versions, where they're doing this because they have to. Where here it seems like a conscious choice, where yeah they have to do it, but it seems like there's like another motive behind it than just to save their baby, which is how I felt before, where like they could give a fuck about Krypton as a whole, they just want to save their baby and make sure their baby has a life. Here it's the opposite, where they care more, seemingly to me, about their race's survival and less about the individual that is Kal-El, their baby. So that was interesting, and I didn't really like that take on it. But I did like that they spoke in an actual alien language. So that was cool in terms of the realism of the universe and making the universe actually seem big. Because obviously, from another planet, however far they away Krypton was, they wouldn't speak English. So that was a nice touch. So that kind of does it for the non-spoiler section. Like I said, if you're a comic book fan, I think you would like this movie, especially if you're a Superman comic book fan. If you're a Superman fan in general, you would probably like this movie. Unless you're like me, where Man of Steel is the kind of first Superman thing that you've really liked, because this is a very different type of Superman from Man of Steel. But I think it does have some similar elements to kind of a lot of the previous Superman. Um, and as a film fan or as a casual audience member, you might enjoy this movie, you might not. It just all depends, I guess, on your taste. Um, but for me, I guess I'll end with a score out of 10. I would give it a 7.5 out of 10. It would be an 8 without those questionable things in it, but with those, it brings the score down for me to a 7.5. So that's all I'm going to say. I am still excited for the future of the DC universe on film, but I was hoping for more from this. I'm also excited for Peacemaker, and I do hope we get to see David Corenswet as Superman again. Um, and that's it. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you next time. Peace.